Hey everybody, Happy New Year's Eve! A tradition that a lot of people have is watching the Twilight Zone marathon that airs every year on the Syfy channel. Well, we spent one long year in the Twilight Zone, so I decided to finish the year out by doing a countdown. But everybody talks about episodes like Time Enough at Last, Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, Eye of the Beholder, and there's a lot of other episodes with rich ideas, strong performances, great designs, that even if they end up on more extensive great episodes list, aren't talked about or analyzed nearly as much. So, that's what I wanted to do and talk about this time around. No New Year's plans? No problem. Join me for this viewing party as I do a countdown of the top 5 most underrated Twilight Zone episodes. Fair warning, there will be spoilers as this is also an analysis, so proceed at your own caution. Anyways, before we get started, here are some honorable mentions. After Hours. It's about a woman who makes a department store purchase on a floor that doesn't exist. It's a cool idea with some stylish design, and it's overall not a bad episode, but it is an idea I have seen before, and I'm not a big fan of the main character. She comes across as whiny and entitled even after the reveal of what she is and why she did what she did. I should feel sympathy for this character who essentially wants to be human, but I ultimately don't. Perchance to Dream. The story itself is a little thin, about a man who sees a psychiatrist for insomnia when he does sleep is haunted by dreams of a carnival dancer, but it has such a strong atmosphere throughout with some of the most stylish film noir cinematography ever put on TV in the dream sequences. It's worth watching for that alone. The Masks. This is a creative idea and a great episode about greedy relatives after an inheritance with their inner nature revealed. It's also the only episode to have been directed by a woman, Ida Lupino, who starred in the episode 16mm Shrine. As good as the episode is, the more I looked into it, I realized this episode is talked about a lot, and the same information does tend to come up, so there's not much of a different perspective I can offer on it. Death's Head Revisited. A response to the Nazi trials that were happening around the time the episode was written, it's a great story about a Nazi who's put on trial by his own victims. It's an excellent episode that definitely holds a lot of relevance, especially in an age when hate's rearing its ugly head again. But this is also a subject that is covered a lot more in depth by a lot more people who are a lot smarter than me. As a result, I wanted to talk about an episode and subject that are a lot less discussed, and you'll see what I mean when we get to number 2. And finally, The Dummy. Puppets are creepy, and this episode proves it. It also has a lot of stylish design and atmosphere, but the story itself about a man who's controlled by his own puppet is pretty straightforward. Not that it's bad by any means, it is a great episode, but the idea has also been done many times in the decades since, and I wanted to pick episodes that I could analyze a little more thoroughly. That being said, let's begin the countdown! Number 5. Long Distance Call. How something can be both so heartfelt and yet so creepy is an impressive feat. Grandma Bales is an old woman who's extremely close to her grandson Billy. Too close, his mother thinks. Grandma knows she's dying and won't be able to see her grandson's life, so she gifts him a telephone that he can always use to talk to her, which Billy can do even after she passes. Almost as if he's in a trance, Billy becomes more reckless in order to join her on the other side. Finding out he was asked to do this, his parents beg her to let him live a full life of his very own. I wanted to talk about this one because, while there is a very genuine sweetness between Grandma and Billy, it's also clear she's using him as an emotional security blanket, which, let's be honest, a lot of people still do, with their cats, their dogs, their childhood friends, their fandoms, all sorts of things which are fine in moderation but unhealthy in extremes. Grandma Bales is not a bad person by any means. She's lonely, frightened, has some unresolved traumas, and is now faced with her own mortality. She has understandable human fears, but is making the wrong choice about handling them. She wants her grandson to come with her, which would end the life he's just beginning. The episode is a good warning about the dangers of an emotional dependence. showing through Billy's brushes with death that it's ultimately unfair to another living being when you make it the sole vessel for your traumas and fears. But the relationship between the family is genuinely loving, genuinely caring, and that all comes out through too. You always feel the love that these characters, this family, has for each other. And among a creepy environment, you do see a lot of heart that comes through, and that's really beautiful. This episode is both heartfelt and creepy and comes to a beautiful conclusion, making it a bittersweet story about the importance of learning when to let go. Number 4. Walking Distance. This one is definitely more known among enthusiastic Twilight Zone fans and has been getting a little more attention recently, especially as it's Rod Serling's favorite, but it's still not talked about in the same way some of the others are, so I still count it. This is also an episode that involves an adult using a child as an emotional security blanket, but in a slightly different context, and with a different message. Martin Sloan, a man facing burnout from his demanding job and the responsibilities of adulthood, gets his car serviced at a gas station and finds he's within walking distance from his hometown. Remembering his wonderful childhood, he walks into town to find everything's exactly the way he remembered it. A little too familiar. He finds his parents who are exactly the age he remembered them, and even his childhood self. He tries to convince them he is who he is, but ends up scaring his younger self, which permanently injures the kid and also himself. And in response, gets a firm but gentle reminder from his father to look ahead instead of behind him. Several Twilight Zone episodes deal with the dangers of nostalgia and how living in a romanticized past is ultimately a bad thing. 16mm Shrine, Young Man's Fancy, A Stop at Willoughby, just to name a few. But Walking Distance did it the best. Plus, you can take a lot away from it. It's not just about the dangers of getting too deep into nostalgia. It's about why someone would want to. It's about wanting to go home to something familiar when you're in the unknown. It's about how even as an adult, you sometimes still need your parents or the people that raised you. It's about looking ahead to the future instead of clinging to the past. It's about accepting adulthood, letting the kids of today have their own childhood. It's about still being able to enjoy some of the things you liked as a kid, just in a more mature way. The Twilight Zone is sometimes a scary place, but it's a place we all end up in from time to time, and have the power within ourselves to get through it. Number 3. Nick of Time. Most people know William Shatner starred in the famous episode Nightmare at 20,000 Feet. Well, here he is again in a lesser-known, equally compelling episode. The plot is that a young newlywed couple, Dawn and Pat, need to get their car fixed as they drive to their honeymoon. Dawn is superstitious, always worrying about the future. When they sit down at a restaurant to pass the time, they come across a mystic seer box. Dawn asks it a few questions to see its predictions come true, and starts to get obsessed with it, and the rest of the episode is spent figuring out if the box truly knows the future, like Dawn thinks, or not, like Pat thinks. One thing about the Twilight Zone is that they show that anything can become an addiction. This is such a great episode because of its themes around superstition. The theme of the episode is not to live your life by superstition, that you have to make your own luck and control your own destiny. But it doesn't treat superstitious people like they're stupid. In fact, it's sympathetic as to why someone would be in that mindset. At the beginning of the episode, Pat says that Dawn doesn't believe in himself. Superstition is a way to feel like you have control, comfort, and direction in a chaotic, uncertain world. The danger is when it gets to the point of letting it run your life. And unlike many Twilight Zone episodes where the magic is often confirmed as real, the ambiguity of the situation fits perfectly within the theme. Maybe the box does predict the future, maybe it doesn't. Even if it does, it doesn't matter. What does matter is taking charge in your own life with all the twists and turns it takes. Dawn, with the support of his wife, eventually comes to understand this and faces the future with pride. The excellent acting and genuinely sweet chemistry of William Shatner and Patricia Breslin really sells it. The closing narration describes them as escaping one of the darkest corners of the Twilight Zone, as we see a second couple wasting their lives and money on it inside a prison of their own making. Number 2. 4 o'clock. This episode is amazing. Clearly inspired by the McCarthy trials, which, for those of you who don't know, in the 1950s, the United States was a superpower, as was the Soviet Union. There was a competition for power, and they were competing political ideologies. United States is capitalism, Soviet Union is communism. A senator named Joseph McCarthy took advantage of Americans' fears of communism and made false, baseless allegations of various people being communists, ruining many lives in the process. He got people fired from their jobs, he got people blacklisted from various industries, especially in Hollywood, and even got people imprisoned. This episode is one big, beautiful fuck you to McCarthyism. Oliver Krangle, a self-appointed crusader for justice, calls people's jobs to ruin their lives with a series of baseless allegations. A couple of his victims try to reason with him, but to no avail. It only convinces him that evil is everywhere, and eventually comes up with a plan that will transform all the evil people of the world at 4 o'clock. This episode is fantastic satire that works in a similar way that Blazing Saddles does with racism. Krangle in this episode starts off genuinely threatening, but the more we see of him, the more it's revealed just how insane he, and by extension his mindset, truly is. His parrot reminds us of this throughout. The journey into revealing his true insanity becomes unbelievably hilarious, especially when he reveals just what his evil plan is.
Turn all the evil people into 2 feet tall. How does evil spread? By public transport. So I had it in mind that I might take the stiffness out of airplane propellers.
Do you think there's a possibility that this guy could be the gremlin that Shatner saw?
All the evil ones. They're all turning into tiny little gnomes.
The lead actor, Theodore Bickel, in real life was a human rights activist who actively opposed McCarthyism in the 1950s. He plays this part with such energy and sadistic glee, and as a result is an utter delight to watch, especially when you get to the end. Yeah, the twist is obvious, yeah, the symbolism's on the nose, but when people like this still exist who can and do get power, this is one instance you can't risk being too subtle. Cutting the evil of the world down to size is another fine example of ironic justice that often does but doesn't only happen in the Twilight Zone. Number 1. A piano in the house. I'm truly surprised that even Twilight Zone fans don't bring up this episode all that much because it's beautiful. This is an episode that's truly showcasing the best and the worst of humanity. Fitzgerald Fortune, a vindictive bully of a theater critic, buys a player piano for his wife for her birthday. The piano he buys turns out to read people's souls through the music that it plays. Curious about the innermost natures of people, what they're concealing, he uses the piano to humiliate people by forcing them to reveal their innermost thoughts in front of others. When the tables are turned, we see his true nature revealed as well. It's a well-written story with great characters, but the acting is truly what elevates it into a masterpiece. It needs to be seen, no, experienced, because that's what this is, an experience getting to know people, and how complex and how kind or how cruel they can really be. Barry Morse as the theater critic is perfect. He definitely delivers on Fitzgerald being an asshole, and his glee in humiliating truly wonderful people makes him utterly despicable. But he also has a presence that makes him so much fun to hate. You can just tell that Barry Morse was an accomplished stage actor just by his voice.
How do you do? I'm Fitzgerald Fortune, the theater critic.
His eventual breakdown is equally as compelling to watch, revealing Fitzgerald as a scared, immature little boy underneath all that bravado. Most people, if not everyone, knows someone like this, heck, maybe even has been someone like this. It's not just an episode where a jerk gets his poetic justice like something like 4 o'clock, it's getting to know and understand the kinds of people that like to hurt and humiliate others. Plus, the side characters are all wonderful. Through them, we really see the inner beauty other people really can have. Special shout out to Marge Moore, who's played by Muriel Landers. She gives such a compelling, vulnerable depth to this person and carries herself with such a grace, energy, and elegant dignity. And even though there are a few fat comments in this, kudos to the fact that this is a fat, not conventionally attractive woman who gets to be a fully fleshed out, beautiful person full of life, who the episode deems as worthy of respect, dignity, and admiration.
Did you know that I envied you, Marge? I can't embrace the world as you do.
The butler is also great. He sets up one of the funniest moments in the entire show.
I make good money, got a nice place to live, my health, money in the bank, I like my job.
But you couldn't possibly. I treat you atrociously.
And the fact that it's music that gets people to reveal themselves is very telling too, as music is such a powerful form of self-expression. I truly don't know why this episode isn't talked about more, but it really should be. I highly recommend people watch this episode and get to know these people for themselves. More people, especially Twilight Zone fans, really need to talk about this one. And as the closing narration says, a man who went searching for concealed persons found himself in the Twilight Zone. And that's my countdown this year. Happy New Year's, everybody. Drink something carbonated, stay up all night, take care of yourselves, because I don't want you all dead. I don't know what the future's gonna hold this year, but thank you guys so much for celebrating the past year with me. Thank you guys for being here. It's been crazy. I don't know what the future's gonna hold. I don't even know what I'm saying right now. So take care of yourselves, have a great night, and once again, have a very happy new year.